Alright boys, today we got ourselves a nice set of sumo tires for the Surron from Unicycle. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what we get with it. So when you order this, they're super nice and they actually include a stock chain size. So if you're going to use the stock sprocket on these wheels and tires, they give you a chain for that. However, for us, we're going to go ahead and upgrade the sprocket as well. So this is going to be a guide for changing the rims, tires, or just changing the rims and tires setup, but also adding a bigger sprocket and a bigger chain. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside in our spare parts drawer on the floor. Let's go ahead and pull these Larrys out. Here we got the rear tire. You can tell because she's dummy thick. There she is. There is our rear tire. And again, we're going to take off the sprocket and go ahead and install a bigger one because we love torque. Alright, now onto the front tire. Go ahead and pull this out of here. Again, we'll go ahead and snip our little covers off. And don't lose that cone right there. That could have been bad. Go ahead and seat that back in there. That's a little spacer for the axle.
Yeah, those look so clean.
Those look clean. Those look really clean.
Oh.
We'll use this piece of cardboard right out of the box as just a nice little work table so we don't scratch up the rear rotor. So we'll go ahead and take this and just drop it right into that, and that'll be our little workstation. So we're going to go ahead and pop these 5 Allens off to take off your rear sprocket. The big reveal. Ooh. Nice, nice, nice. Free stickers. And what you're going to want to do here is install the sprocket so that the writing is facing towards you. So you're going to be like this. And now you'll just use the exact same stock bolts and thread them back in. And I would recommend putting them all in before you start reefing down on one of them. So just kind of work your way around and just hand thread these in a couple to line everything up. And once all those are lined up, we'll take our hex and we'll just start going around in a little star pattern. Tighten these up. All right, there she is. Go ahead from the stock sprocket in comparison to that nice big 58 tooth. This thing will have a ton of torque right off the snap. It's gonna be awesome for wheelies. So now let's get her set up on the bike. Let's get this rear tire off the bike. So I'd highly recommend finding like a 5-gallon bucket, and we'll use that as our little jack unless you have a dirt bike jack. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do here is once the bike's up on the bucket, we're gonna go ahead and find the master link of the chain. So what you're looking for is through the chain, you'll see how they're all similar links, and eventually, if you rotate the rear tire around, you'll find your master link. That is what you need to take off to disconnect the chain. You can take a hammer and a flathead screwdriver and kind of line it up and just kind of give it a little tap, and hopefully it will come off like that. And then just take your pliers and kind of just work it off the rest of the way like that, and then just pull it off. Now set that aside, and then this link right here will pop off. And then for a stock Surron chain, you have 2 rubber O-rings that will sit between the link. So we'll take those both off as well. And then the final step here is grab with both your fingers and pull one way or the other. So what you're going to do is grab this side of the chain, grab this side of the chain, and push and pull, and you'll pull that link right apart. And there you go. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just take your rear tire and rotate it like this, and that will kick the chain right off. And then on the front, use one hand to pull the chain a little bit and guide it out, the other hand just to spin that primary drive and just kind of spin that chain right off your front sprocket. And then when you get right about here, it will drop right out, and there is your stock chain. Next thing that you're gonna wanna do here is also gonna be on the rear. And we're gonna go ahead and take off the rear caliper. So if you wanna swing up over here, take a look down there. There is our stock rear caliper. Take this bolt out. Go ahead and take the other bolt out. Once you have this removed, go ahead and just lift your rear caliper right off. And then usually what I do is just set it up in front like that, just up and out of the way. Now, next step will be popping the rear axle bolt. So you might have to jump on the other side with a hex key just to hold the other side of the axle so it doesn't spin. And then just finish off pulling this. And just finish off pulling this out all the way. And then unthread it by hand. And there you go. There's your axle nut. Now everything's nice and loose. And kind of give this a little tap to start feeding it through. And then your axle will start to protrude on this side of your axle block. So now what you're going to do is just hold the rear tire up a little bit and slide that axle right out. And then just go ahead and on this plate, this little bracket, you're going to push forward a little bit. And then the whole thing should just slide right out. There's our rear tire off the bike. Now let's move on to reinstalling on our brand new street tire. One of the only things that I will say about doing this whole process is that the stock axle blocks are really not the best because they're able to just come out, slide out, fall out. As you can see, this one actually came out with our stock axle. And this adjustment system is not the best. So I just want to give a huge company shout out to my boys at Prickly, not sponsored. So I'll just go ahead and show you the quick difference here between the stocks and the Prickly version. So instead of just having the stock axle block with nothing on it and just have it rest against it, on the Prickly version they actually recess into the axle block. So you can see how that just kind of holds it like that. So when these are tight in there, when you pull that axle block out, these won't fall out, which is just absolutely awesome. It helps you so much with time and just your typical finicky stuff. Well, so for us, we're going to go ahead and not only remove the stock axle blocks, but we are also going to be removing the adjustment bolt so that we can replace it with Prickly's very own version. Back this bolt, this nut off right here, so that it's loose. Just like that. And then we'll just on-thread this whole bolt. There's one. Now we're just going to repeat the same process on this other side. Alright, so on these Prickly axle blocks, what you'll see is your orientation will pretty much be that you click the bolt in, and then your line will be facing down so that you can adjust later so you can make them even Steven on the other side. So we'll go ahead, put that in, set that in like that, and then we'll take that 8mm that I was talking about and just take this bolt and start feeding her in just like that. Sometimes you can just do it by hand, which is pretty good. So what we'll honestly do here is we'll just set these all the way in and then do our adjustment out at the very end just to make sure that they're even. That's pretty much all the way in. Now we'll just do the other side real quick and do the exact same thing. Alright, so we're about to put our rear tire on. So real quick, what you're going to want to do is take off your 2 wheel spacers. So these just come right out. They just pop right out. You don't have to yank on them or anything. Just they slide, obviously. You can just pull them right out. So this bigger one here is going to be your sprocket side, and this is going to be your rotor side. We're just going to take that, put it right into the bearing, and click it in. And then on this side, do the same. Take it and just click it in. Bam. So slide it forward. Maybe just kind of back off the axle a little bit like that if you need to. And then bring this rear tire right up and in. It'll kind of click in. Slide that rear axle through everything. And then final alignment into your nice Prickly axle blocks. And then once you're in there, she's spinning, she's ready to go. Go ahead and take your axle nut and just thread that right on there. nice and just finger tight for now, so that way nothing will move on you. And she's in there like swimwear, looking pretty solid. So now what we'll do, with everything still, this being still just finger tight, let's go ahead and install our chain. And there she is, that 112 link. Now we will start to feed the chain up and around that rear sprocket. So you're gonna want to take one side here and just drop it right on the teeth, like that. And now just give your tire a little spin to start feeding that chain right on in. Now once it gets here, you're gonna want to take it, so you're gonna go over that little plate there, pull some through, maybe feed a little bit more through with the rear tire, so you have a little bit of slack. And then what you're gonna do is again take this and feed it up and over onto the front sprocket, and then holding it with one finger, you're gonna wanna try to reach in behind and grab that primary drive again, and just slowly roll that chain around that front sprocket. So you start feeding it around. And once you get through a little bit, grab it here and just keep feeding it, and eventually you'll feed it through a good bit until you probably want to bring it. I usually bring it like roughly to the middle of this space, so I have a little bit of working room to put that master link on. So we'll bring it to right about there is fine. That's a good working situation for me, and I'll just let it sit. So now that you're on the front sprocket, what you'll do is you'll carefully lift it up off the rear sprocket, and you'll just kind of rotate the rear sprocket back to get the chain as nice and tight as possible on the top. Then you'll wrap this around the front, and there you go. Now we're pretty lined up. So go ahead and go on the downhill side of the chain, pop it through halfway, just like that. Then we'll grab the uphill side and we'll bring it up, and we'll click it together just like that. And now is how you see how having the blocks all the way forward makes it easier because of how limp the chain is, so it's a lot easier to make that connection. So then you're going to take the other side of the, put it on, and then we'll put on our final little sealer there. And again, we will use our pliers to just, you'll hear that nice audible click, and now our chain is fully connected. What we'll do here is we'll just slowly start sinking our axle blocks back to tighten up our chain. So what we're going to want to do is go onto the 8mm side, which is the side closest to the axle block, and we're just going to want to give it a couple turns to start making that distance grow between the axle block and the swing arm. And then once you do it, a couple times, we're going to switch over to the other side to keep it even so that we pull the rear tire back straight. And the way that kind of to make sure you're even, is you can see on the side of these prickly axle blocks, you'll have a line right there. And then you can count the amount of ridges that is on the rear swing arm here. That's a decent tightness for the chain. There's no slop in it. So we are at 1, 2, 3 ridges back on this line, and on this side we are 1, 2, almost 3. So we'll just give this a little bit more to even out, to make sure that our wheel is centered. Alright, so now once you get these centered so that we're on 3 on this side and 3 on this side, and that means that your wheel will be riding nice and straight, because if you're at 3 on this side and 2 on this side, you're going to be kind of riding, your wheel will be a little bit crooked. Go ahead and tighten your 10mm all the way down. So you just hold this with an 8 and tighten this with a 10 until that nut is up against the swing arm. That way it holds it, and then just go ahead and do the exact same thing to the other side. Now that we know exactly where everything is, everything's set, we're going to go ahead and tighten down our axle block, or our axle nut, sorry. So we'll just start going around. Again, you might need to hold the hex side of your axle until it gets tight so that it doesn't move on you or doesn't just spin on you. So we'll go ahead and tighten that up, and we'll just kind of give this a nice tightness, because you really don't want your axle to pop out when you're riding. So now to finish this off, so let's go ahead and drop that back on, feed our bolts through, and now when you do that, you're just going to want to loosely kind of put one in, and then take the other bolt and drop that in to make sure everything lines up. Now kind of work them down until they're snug, but you can still move the caliper side to side. So now if you don't line up your caliper, you'll be riding one side or the other of your brake and it will squeak. So that's why those holes are slotted. So now what you're going to want to do is look down from the top and push your caliper back and forth a little bit so that you can see the rotor is perfectly in the middle of your two brake pads. And then once you have it pretty much in the middle, just tighten it up. And then once you're tightened up, all you're going to do is just take the rear tire and pass it through and make sure that you don't feel it sticking or grinding or anything like that. And that is pretty much everything to do with the rear tire setup. So now let's move on to the front. Now let's go ahead and start off by taking off your front caliper. And there is our front brake. So we'll just slide that right off, and we'll go ahead and leave it off to the side. So let's go ahead and break the front axle off. Pop your axle off. So we're just going to take our hex key and pull it and unscrew that. That's our nut. Set that aside for now. Now our next step is we are going to want to loosen up these 4 Allens that hold the axle, and we're going to pop these and just loosen them up. You don't have to take them out, just loosen them up. Okay, do the same thing on this other side for these 2. Again, don't have to take them out. Alright, so now we're just going to push the axle out. Take the Allen key and press it. And then just tighten this other side and give it a little bit of outwards pull. And your axle will just start to kind of wheel its way out. And there you go. There's your front axle. And there is your front tire. This is a lot more of a simple process than the rear. And if these pop off on you like that one just did, don't worry about it. Just make sure that they go back on. They just kind of press right in like that. Just bring this up without losing our cones, and take our front axle and just go ahead and feed it back through your forks and your tire. Now just take your axle nut you took off and just kind of start threading it back in, just hand tight. You're going to want to go ahead and tighten up your 4 smaller Allens again to hold your axle in, and just slowly work your way between the 4 and just make them so that they're just a little snug. Like you can see, it's kind of moving and then just stops. That'll be perfect. Now we'll go back through and actually really crank on them. Once that is done, we'll go back over to this side and with our hex key and just do our final little snug of that axle nut that we had taken out. And that is that. So let's go ahead and feed our 2 bolts back in. We'll just kind of tighten this up a little bit so it still can move a little bit. We'll have to pop our head in here and really check to see. You're just looking for a little bit of air gap between the 2 pads and the rotor. So we'll just find that spot and then we'll tighten her up, and that looks pretty good. And there you have it. There's your front tire installed. Everything that we talked about works exactly the same if you are switching over to a street tire or if you're just reinstalling your stock tire or a different dirt tire. It's all the same process.